Great Friday morning. It is sunny. Hope all is well, family. I hope you all had a great evening. And it is Tanya Brooks, your FBA community folk herbalist, coming to you this Friday morning on May the 25th. And it is nice and bright and sunny, and it's already registering 63 degrees today. We had a little bit of fog, but the sun has since burnt that off. So I'm feeling real like spiffy today. I got my indigo blue head wrap on, and indigo is something that another textile or commodity that my folk, the Gullah Geechee folk, produced and sold. So I'm very honored to wear really anything dealing with the indigo colored blue. But that's just a little history lesson, and that's not what this live is about. This live is, or this video is about to parents, you know, be careful who you allow, or be aware of who you allow around your children. Grandparents who are taking care of their grandchildren, be careful of who you allow, or be mindful of who you allow to be around your grandchildren, because the words that adults speak over your children's lives, into your children's lives, have a very serious impact in the adults that become, or who they become later on in life. I can honestly say that my husband and I can count on one hand how many times we have allowed our children to spend the night out. And it happens twice. And they were with a family member who we obviously trust, and it was a good decision. It was a safe decision. But we haven't allowed our children to sleep out of our house. I mean, and we have other family members who we love, but it's just not happening. Nothing personal, but yes, very personal. And for me, I remember being pregnant with our first child, our son, and telling Sean, he's not spending the night out. Like, I don't play that, because I know so many things for me and my cousins and my brother. A lot of conversations took place with me, or a lot of things have been said to me as a child that really could have ruined me. I could have allowed it to ruin me and stop my development and becoming the adult that I am today. But I was a different child. You know what I mean? I was a different child. When things were said to me that were said to me to be very mean and to be very hurtful and to speak down to me and to destroy my confidence, I was that child that was like, I looked at that adult and literally said, I'm going to show you. That's not what's going to happen. So be careful who you allow. Be mindful who you allow around your children, your grandchildren. Because again, nowadays, there are a lot of grandparents that are raising their children. And that's just the time in which we're living in, you know. I know in the Black culture, you know, drugs really plagued parents and destroyed families. And you have grandparents raising their grandchildren, you know, and mothers and fathers may be incarcerated. They may have succumbed to different addictions and are no longer here. And so things are just different. But let me get back to the main topic. And I'm again always going to use myself. 2 examples, things that were said to me, and these are things that were said to me. One was from a family member, and one was from a educator whose daughter I was really good friends with at the time. So with the family member, it was a close family member, and it was actually my favorite aunt's husband. And I don't refer to him as my uncle because of the things that he would say to me, but in the way he would treat me. And the thing is, my favorite aunt, her house was the neighborhood house. Like, all the neighborhood children went to this house. And her middle daughter, my middle cousin, because they had 3 daughters, she was also my favorite cousin. And she was someone that I looked up to and I admired. And my brother also loved, and I would say that this aunt also was his favorite aunt. We were always there. When my parents would go out on the weekends, you know, we would stay at this particular aunt's house and, you know, sleep over. And even after school, excuse me, we would make our way to this particular aunt's house. She was always in walking distance. And, you know, back in the day, you know, when you got out of school and if your parents weren't there, you went to the nearest family member or neighbor's house and you stayed there until your parents came home. And I say parents because, you know, for the most part, when I grew up, you know, it was in a 2-parent household. And in the neighborhood, there was I don't remember in my neighborhood where I grew up in the 80s and the 70s and the 80s where there weren't 2-parent households. It was very few and far in between. And usually, if that was the case, one of the parents usually would have had passed away. But I say that because, you know, society would have you think that wasn't the case in the Black community, and that was very much the case. But anyhow, back to this particular incident. So I remember being over my favorite aunt's house, and it was a weekend, and all the other, because my aunt also had a pool, all of the other children were like on the side yard, in the backyard playing. And I had went in the house to use the bathroom. And I remember, you know, back then when it was hot, you know, all the doors and everything were closed because the AC was running. And I remember my aunt telling me when I left to go through the front door, not to go through the back door, to go through the front door. And I went through the front door to go back outside, and her husband was sitting on the porch. Now, mind you, my aunt and my mother were close in age. My grandparents had 6 children. And my aunt, I think, was maybe 3 or 4 years older than my mother. So they were very close in age. And And so was her husband. Her husband, you know, at the time, I would say that they probably were in their 30s as parents, and so were my parents. But anyhow, I walked through the front door. Be careful who you allow, and be mindful who you allow around your children. And I walked out the front door because my aunt told me to, and he was sitting on the front porch. And I always had a way about me. I was always a very independent child. I always just did things different. You know, my mother even told me, you know, Tanya, it's just something about you. You're just a different, know that you're just a different little girl. And I guess it was just something about me. I never felt that he liked me. Now, mind you, he had 3 daughters of his own. Him and my aunt had 3 daughters. And I remember opening the door and stepping down on the step. And, you know, we were raised to have manners. And so I said, excuse me. And I, you know, said his name. And he turned as I'm stepping down now on the last step before I get on the front sidewalk to, you know, walk around the house. He looked at me and he said, you know, you think you're something. And have a good day. He said, well, you got your hair flat in the back. Love you.
I fixed it.
Okay. He said, you know, you think you're something. And I said, excuse me? And he said, you think you're something. Why? I'm here to tell you, you're not nothing. You're not nothing, and you're not going to ever be anything. And I'm from an era where, you know, you didn't have children out of wedlock, right? And you got married and you had children. Even if you found out you was pregnant and you and your husband weren't married at the time, you got married. And the reason why I'm saying all of that is because of what he said to me. And it'll all make sense. He said, you ain't got nothing, you ain't nothing, and you're never going to be anything. Now, mind you, I was under the age of 10 when this person said this to me. He said, and you know what else? You ain't going to do nothing but end up with having a bunch of kids, and you're not even going to be married. Nobody's going to marry you. And I remember looking at him and I said, oh, you just watch. You just watch me. I'm going to be everything. And I'm not going to be like how you say I'm going to be. And I said, and I don't like you. And he said, good, I don't like you either. And that was it. I walked away, went out, and I played with my cousins and the other neighbors, the other neighborhood children. And I never told an adult. Because one, I knew if I had told my mother or my father, that would have been the end of him. Now, those words could have destroyed me. They were meant to destroy me. This young, innocent child who was under the age of 10. And I'm his niece. I'm his niece. I think at this point, him and my aunt have been married probably 15 years, 16 years, because their eldest daughter was definitely, another one of my favorite cousins, was definitely a teenager, you know? And immediately I responded to his words of death, because that's what they were meant to be, to destroy me. And I said, oh no. Right? And I was a little feisty little brown little girl. I was very feisty. And it will tell you about yourself. So I guess in that aspect, yes, I was different. Be careful and be mindful who you allow around your children. I took those words and I allowed them to push me to be better than what he said was going to happen to me. And I'm not saying that if you've had children out of wedlock and you have multiple children's fathers or husbands that you're bad. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is those words, and my parents had no clue. Because again, my brother and I adored going to my favorite aunt's house. They had no clue. And again, I would not tell anyone about this until I was grown. I mean, I'm talking grown. And I never told that particular aunt, and I never told my parents. Second incident that happened to me. I was in 5th grade, and there was another student who I was very close with, and her father was an educator in the school system that we attended, the public school system in which we attended. And at this particular time, my parents were separated. My father was no longer in the house. And I remember her father she would get in the car with her father, because again, her father, at the end of the school day or whatever, she would get in the car with her father, because like I said, he was an educator. And I remember her joining gymnastics, and I wanted to join gymnastics as well. And she and we would always play together at recess, and we were friends. And she had probably been going to gymnastics for a little bit, and she was showing me the new moves and things like that she was learning. And I was a natural gymnast. And I remember she showed me one time how to do the round off, and I did the round off. This in particular time when her father came to pick her up, because again, he was an educator at a different school, but he would come and pick her up at the end of our day. And he was an educator at the high school at the time, or it may have been the junior high school, because we were still in elementary school. And she was telling me, well, you could join gymnastics with me, and my dad can, because my parents were separated and my mother worked second shift, so my mother would not have been able to take me to gymnastics class, because I think the class started at like 6 o'clock in the evening or something like that, or practice, and my mom was at work, and I remember her telling me this particular day, she was like, you can join gymnastics, and my dad can take you. You can ride with us. My dad can come and pick you up, and he can take you. And she was like, come to the car and ask him, tell him, and he'll get your number, and he can call your mom, and they can make arrangements, blah, 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 whatever. And I remember us running up to his car as we were on the playground, and her telling her father our plan. And she had forgotten her bag or something in the school, and she had to go back into school to get it. I think she actually forgot her gym bag in the school. She had to go back into school to get it. And so I'm standing there at the car with her father, and I'm talking to him, Mr. So-and-so. Yep, I'm looking forward to it. And, yeah, this is my mom's. This is our house number. This is our phone number, rather. And you can give my mom a call tomorrow because, like, you know, she's not there tomorrow, right now. But you can give her a call tomorrow. And Mr. So-and-so, can you write down my number? And he looked at me and he said almost the exact same thing that a couple years earlier, my aunt's husband, I refuse to call him my uncle, said to me. He said to me, he was like, you guys can't afford the gymnastics that I take my daughter to. Because we lived in a part of Bloomfield that was, I guess, considered like the hood or whatever. And we lived in Persian Park. And they lived in the boonies. And he said, you guys can't afford that. You can't afford the gymnastic classes that we, you know, I'm sending my daughter to. You know, you're not going to be anything. You're not going to be a gymnast. You're not great like my daughter. This is what this man said to me. And I stood there and I said, what? What'd you say to me? And I remember telling that man to go to hell. I said, you go to hell. He said, no, you go to hell. And you're not going to be nothing in life. Needless to say, I don't want to give out too much information, because if someone's watching this from the town in which I grew up with, they're going to know exactly who I'm talking about. But needless to say, his daughter ended up having substance abuse issues. She ended up, and him and his wife actually ended up divorcing maybe 3 or 4 years after that. And she ended up, as an adult, having substance abuse issues with alcohol. She ended up becoming incarcerated. And her life is really in a bad way. And she reached out to me. And the reason why I know what happened to her, she reached out to me maybe like 6 years ago on one of the social media platforms. And that's when I found out, like, all the things that transpired in her life. And her father don't have really any type of relationship. And I have seen her father through the years, because I am now currently one that works in the school system in which I grew up in. And he recently retired. And he looks horrible. He looks broke down. And but again, I took that thing and those words that he said to me to try and destroy me, I took those things and I used them as my sounding board. But I was that type of child that I didn't allow what people said to me that was meant to destroy me. I flipped it. But not all children have that strength to do that. So, as a parent, talk to your children. Be mindful. Ask your children questions like, are you okay being around so-and-so? How do you feel being around so-and-so? Do you want to go to so-and-so's house? If they tell you no, don't send them. Be mindful who you allow around your children. So that's this. And I hope, this just sheds some light on how precious our children are to us, grandchildren. And just be mindful. All right, family, listen. Be great to yourself because you are great. Be great to your family. They deserve your greatness. Be great to your community. Without love, I'm telling you, self-love first, instill that in your children. We have absolutely nothing. And as always, clarity is key, but without consistency, we have no balanced family. Be mindful of who you allow around your children, and be well.